Yesterday was the 4th of July. Aaron, do you know what we celebrate on the 4th of July?
Michael Bay movies.
No.
New England Patriots.
Well, not really.
Getting warmer? Oh, but yes, on the 4th of July, we celebrate our country's independence from the British nation. In 1776, we became an independent nation, and we're now our own country with our own government, our own laws, our own freedoms, our own football games, our own hot dogs, our own fireworks.
Oh, Aaron.
You put them together and it's a bigger fire.
Where'd you get those letters? I thought I hit them. I thought I put them up really high.
You thought so, but you always forget that I'm really, really tall and can always reach things that you think are really high up. You say all the time, no fire, Aaron, no fire.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but you leave a lot of candles out all over the place, and I just want to burn them. So I think we have some sparklers left over.
Oh, no, not inside, not inside. Maybe another day. Yeah, you'll never find out where I hit those sparklers. They're really high. Let's get back on topic. In America, we commemorate the 4th of July to celebrate our country becoming an independent nation. It's so fun to have a time to celebrate, and it's important to reflect on how we are using our freedoms to be godly citizens. As Christians, we know that God is sovereign and that He is the ruler of all. As He has placed us in this country at this particular time, we are called to be citizens who glorify God.
Well, how can we do that? I mean, we're not all going to run for office or serve in the military or wear red, white, and blue every day, as awesome as those things would be.
Yeah.
But I mean, these kids who are watching are too young to even vote. So how can we be citizens who glorify God?
Well, one way that everyone can do is to be committed to pray for our nation and our nation's leaders. In Romans chapter 13, it says that God has appointed leaders and the governing authorities of the world, and we are called to be obedient to the laws of the land. In this way, we can support our leaders, we can pray for them to have discernment and wisdom and to rule with integrity.
Hey, that's actually really easy and also very important. Everyone can and should pray. We see it throughout Jesus' life on earth, that He committed to and relied heavily upon prayer.
Absolutely.
He prayed alone and with others. He prayed inside and outside. He gave thanks and He asked for help from the Lord. And He relied on prayer as He taught, performed miracles, and walked with God. In 1 Chronicles 16:11, it says, "Look to the Lord and His strength. Seek His face always."
Exactly. We see it countless times how Jesus relied on prayer, and we are called to follow in His example. Today we're going to look at something Jesus said about prayer, a parable He said about prayer in Luke chapter 18. Luke 18 begins with a parable. Parable.
What is a parable?
A parable is a story designed to teach a lesson. And right away, Luke tells us what lesson this parable was supposed to teach. He says that this parable that Jesus told was supposed to teach them to always pray and to not lose heart, which means to not give up, to never lose hope. And in Jesus's parable, in this story, the first character is a judge.
Judge?
Yeah.
Oh, I know some judges.
Really?
Yeah, Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown.
Oh, the kids aren't going to know those.
Sylvester Stallone went by Judge Dredd. There was a remake, but not to be confused with a recent film called The Judge.
Well,
different.
these aren't kids.
But that one has Robert Downey Jr. in it, who was an Iron Man, who is a superhero figure.
Good.
Superhero man. So it works. It circles back. It's all good. But you know, the point is, judges are awesome. And they find the truth and to look to know who is innocent or guilty, and they help justice prevail.
Well, I mean, that's what we hope judges do, but in this story, Aaron, this judge was not a good guy. No. He was not righteous. It says he didn't fear God, and he did not respect people. So he was not a good judge. This is not a good judge in Jesus' story. And in this story, a widow is continually coming to the judge over and over saying, please give me justice against my adversary. So this widow had some sort of enemy, someone who was antagonizing her or being mean to her, and she was continually going to the judge saying, please help me, please help me, please help me. But remember, this judge wasn't a very good guy, and so he continually didn't help her. And she kept coming to him, even though he didn't help her. And she kept coming to him, and eventually, here's what he said. He said, It says, for a while he refused, but afterward he said to himself, though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I'll give her justice, so that she will not beat me down by her continual coming. So even though he wasn't a good guy, and it's not like he really cared about her or cared about the justice that he was giving her, he eventually did give her justice. He eventually helped her, just so that she would stop bothering him. Now Jesus is making a point here. If an unrighteous judge will eventually grant justice, our righteous God, who is in control of everything, will he not want to give us good things? So Jesus is telling us we are called to pray to God. When we have needs, when we see that there's things going on in our world that are not right, we are called to take those cares to God. God is righteous and he is powerful. And bringing those cares to God, we can be sure that God's justice will prevail. Next, Jesus gives a second parable, and this parable, it says, was to help them understand how God sees people. Now, when we think about people seeing other people, sometimes we look on the outside and we're like, oh wow, that person has really cool clothes, or that person's really beautiful, or that person maybe has a lot of money. And sometimes we treat people differently based on how they look on the outside. And Jesus is saying that is not right, and that is not how God sees people. Back then in Jesus' society, they were looking at some people as, wow, like those people are really great, and they were treating them really nice. And there were other people that they were like, oh, these people are not great, and they were treating them pretty meanly. It says they were treating them with contempt, which means they were hating them. Ooh. So Jesus gives them a story to teach them a lesson about how God sees people and how we are called to see people. In this story, he says 2 men went to pray. One of them was a Pharisee and one was a tax collector. Now, if you put your mind back then, when they hear that one was a Pharisee, they probably thought of, wow, that's like a Pharisee was like a leader. Pharisees were religious leaders. They knew about God's law. They were seen as holy. They were seen as wise. They were seen as people who kind of had it all together. They were really, really respected and treated very nicely by other people back then. And this other guy's a tax collector. Now, tax collectors back then, a lot of people saw them as traitors. You're right. They saw them as people working for Rome. They saw them sometimes as corrupt. And sometimes tax collectors they didn't have a very good reputation. Sometimes they would take money more than what they needed. So right away, if they're both going to pray, it seems like God would be pretty happy with this Pharisee and maybe kind of angry at this tax collector. Just like how the people were pretty happy with the Pharisees and pretty angry at the tax collectors. But the Pharisee goes up to pray, and what was his prayer, Aaron?
God, I thank you that I am not like these other men, the extortioners, the unjust, the adulterers, or even the tax collector like that man over there. I fast twice a week. I give tithes, and I get all that I ask for.
You think that's the accent he had?
No.
Well, maybe, but in this story...
Maybe something like this. That's right.
Stop it. Anyway, in this story, you can see the Pharisee is elevating himself before God. In his prayer, he's basically just bragging about himself to God. Like, God, look at me. Look all the great things I do. I'm not like these bad people. I'm awesome. But the tax collector's prayer was different. In this story, the tax collector was praying very, very differently than the Pharisee. How was he praying?
Yeah, he wouldn't even look up. He would cast his head down. He was beating his chest, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner.
Absolutely. So we see here the tax collector was humble. He saw himself rightly before the holy God. He saw God as holy and himself as a sinner. He is saying, God, I need you. I need a savior. He's not elevating himself or bragging about himself like the Pharisee was. And now, in Jesus' story, Jesus says that God looked mercifully on the tax collector because of his humble prayer, and he did not look mercifully on the Pharisee because his prayer was arrogant. He wasn't even saying he needed God. Jesus says at the end of this, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. And in this, Jesus is trying to teach them how God sees people, how we are called to see people, how we are called to go before God in prayer, and how we're always supposed to pray.
It's pretty sweet.
It's pretty sweet. Heroes know that true power comes from God, so they humble themselves before God. They rely on God, who alone is almighty and sovereign. They rely on prayer. They take their cares, their anxious thoughts, their worries to God, who alone is just, who alone is sovereign and powerful. Now this week we celebrated the 4th of July, and in our country we have men and women who serve in our armed forces to protect our country, to defend our country, to serve our country. This week we are going to hear from one of those veterans in our church, Mr. Reese.
Hey Lifeline kids, Sergeant First Class William Reese here, and I am a soldier in the United States Army. You know, as a soldier in the United States Army, you get to do lots of really fun things. Some examples might be like going for long walks with heavy things on your back. Or do lots of push-ups. 997, 998, 999. Or go for really long runs. Or march around and sing fun songs. March. Left, left, left. Your other left, left.
What's my
Left.
other left? Okay, you want me to go right?
No, your left. Left.
I don't understand you anymore.
So, all jokes aside, being a soldier in the United States Army is probably one of the coolest things I think that I've ever done, that I could do with my life. It's opened a lot of doors for me. I've met a lot of cool people. I've been to a lot of different places. I've served all over the U.S. I've served in Germany. I've been in Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq several times. And that is probably one of the biggest sacrifices that I've had to make personally, is just spending a lot of time away from my family. And thankfully, I've been blessed with a super supportive wife, for a family support structure back home. Everybody knows what being a soldier entails. So in that aspect, I am incredibly blessed. Not only that, but I get to, meet new people, other Christians, other folks with different stories, which are very inspirational. So being a Christian, you get that opportunity to witness to others. I think one of my fondest memories is leading a Bible study with a group of young soldiers in Afghanistan whenever we had a few minutes to do so. So the other big part of being a Christian that I bring to my profession is knowing that I'm never alone, that I can always pray when times are rough, when times are good. God is always there to listen, and He is always there to provide that comfort. And as a matter of fact, I would like to share with you a prayer that I wrote in Baghdad, Iraq in 2008, something that I would pray almost daily before I left the wire and went on a mission. So, if all you prayer warriors want to strap on your armor, and you can pray with me. Father, thank you for this day, for the blessings in my life. I thank you for my family, friends, health, and happiness. God, I pray that you might walk with me and guide me. Guide me with each and every footstep, that I may travel the right path. I pray that you bless me with a clear mind and a strong heart to accomplish the tasks that are set before me, not for my glory, God, but for yours. I pray you forgive me of my sins and comfort me with your everlasting love and mercy. God, I pray these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Well, Lifeline kids, I thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself, about what I do, who I am, and how being a Christian impacts. And I would just encourage you to pray. I would encourage you to pray for your family, to pray for your leaders, to pray for your church. We are all soldiers for Christ in this world, and I think that our greatest weapon can be prayer in that regard. So once again, thank you very much. Take care. God bless.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Reese. I'm just going to echo what he says and encourage you. I'm going to encourage us to pray like Mr. Reese this week. We're going to send you a copy of that prayer. So if you as a family want to pray through that, that would be amazing. Now, you might have people in your own family or people that you know who served in the armed forces. I'm going to encourage you to write them a letter of appreciation this week. If you don't know anyone or you want to even write more letters, there is an address on your screen, and you can write to soldiers who are currently serving in our armed forces. Maybe even write to them a prayer that you have for them. That I'm sure would just make them feel really appreciated and really honored. We hope you have a wonderful week.
See ya.